21st Platoon. Hard drop. Secure our landing zone.
Understood.
Over the target in 5.
Hang on to your helmet.
Alright, grunts. Welcome back to From ODST to Helldiver. In this video today, we are going to go over something that a lot of new players to this game don't really notice for quite some time. At least that's been my experience when playing with people of lower level. They don't even realize that they have these unlocked. And it's a little thing called boosters. Now, boosters are something you pick in the loadout screen right before a mission, and each of the members of your squad get to pick a booster, and the boosters will affect every single person in the match. So think of them as team buffs for free, and you get a selection of 4 as a squad in total. Now, you can't pick the same booster between people, so if I get one that has extra health, we can't have 2 of those to further get more health. So think of these as nice little additions that help the squad. There are definitely boosters that are better than others, and some boosters that are essentially worthless. That being said, if you have the option to select a booster, every little bit is probably going to only help the squad, and none of them are going to hurt the squad. With that little introduction of boosters out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into my collection of boosters, which is more or less complete. There are 2 boosters that I did not bother picking. They're quite expensive and ultimately kind of useless. So let's dive in. Alright, so here we are on the loadout screen for our mission. Swap here, we got the stratagem, we got the loadout for weapons and armor. On this, we have the 4 options for our stratagems that we can pick from, and you may notice this little hexagon to the right. This is specifically for boosters, and each member of the squad's going to have access to one. I do think when you guys start the game in at level 1, you initially will not have any boosters, but eventually you will get some if you are unlocking them through the war bonds. So if we look here, you always have the option to select no booster, but these are essentially the boosters that are worth anything. We'll dive into them just a little bit here. First one is Vitality Enhancement. It has damage reduction from all sources, which obviously is good. Overall, this is a very good one. I think it gets selected probably in 90% of all matches. It's just generally all around. Next up, we have the Stamina Enhancement. Increases all Helldivers' stamina capacity and how fast your stamina comes back, which is going to make traversing the map a lot easier and make it just a smoother experience. This is also definitely one of the best. I don't think that it is chosen as often as the Vitality Enhancement. There are a couple of missions where you could pick this, but it's maybe not as useful. So there are some defensive missions where you essentially sit in one spot and have to defend it. So this is, a little less useful at that point. But this is still, in general, for most matches, a very, very good booster. Next up, we have the Muscle Enhancement booster, and essentially it just allows you to traverse difficult terrain without being slowed down. So if you don't know this, there are environmental factors in the game. You can encounter really thick, heavy snow. You can encounter thick sand. You can encounter water sources that you can walk through without drowning. They're going to slow you down as you walk through them. And this also includes bushes as well. And essentially this just lets you move through those with relative ease. Now, I personally actually have never picked this booster. I've always had something better to choose from. But it still is an interesting one if you're in one of those missions where time is very sensitive and you know that there's annoying things on the map, most likely. This could be really good for you. But there's probably things that are a little bit better than this, you'll find. And you are limited in your squad to only have 4, so most of the time I just see this does not end up making the cut. Next up we have the UAV Recon Booster. It increases the Helldiver's effective radar range, and this is surprisingly pretty good. I know when I first started this game, this was my favorite one to pick. You can check the map and see when enemies are coming your direction and prepare for that, and maybe even avoid them. This is very, very good for stealthy playstyles, and it can help your entire squad. It pairs really well with the stealth armor passive, where you can ping a specific spot on the map, which will do a radar to check for enemies there. Obviously this is going to boost that radar range, making that a very good combo. So if you're doing a stealth run, I highly recommend at least testing this out, seeing how it goes, and trying to use the map's radar. Okay, next up is probably, if not the most common booster, maybe the second. The Hellpod Space Optimization. Essentially, when you load into the game, you will not have the most amount of grenades or stims or even primary weapon ammo. And for a good long while you're working on your ship upgrades, when you call in support weapons, they won't always land with full ammo capacity. And this Hellpod Space Optimization pretty much ensures that when you spawn in, your primary, secondary weapons will be maxed out, full capacity of ammo. You will have the maximum allowed grenades and also the maximum amount of stims. This is very, very useful, and you may think that this only affects you at the very beginning of the match, but really this is going to affect you every time you get revived as well. So every time you die, you'll come in fully stocked on ammo as well. This is a very, very good booster. Absolutely one of the best. But you can also technically get away without it if you call in resupplies often enough. But this is a very, very good convenience. Alright, next up is the Localization Confusion. This will increase the time between enemy encounters. Now, I have a hot take on this one. This is actually a very good booster as well, especially on defensive missions. I've noticed, I've used this a couple of times on defensive missions. Sometimes you don't have a number of enemies you have to kill, but instead have to defend a launch site while it launches missiles into the air or escape vehicles, and waves of enemies are going to attack you, and you have to hold out as long as you can and hopefully get the required number of escapes. This right here can give you a great amount of breathing room. You can restock on, for instance, if you're calling in mines and things like that. So this can be very, very good on those type of missions. It can also be decent in regular missions, though not quite as noticeable, but we'll dive a bit more into that when we get into the enemy types. Essentially, they can call in reinforcements but they are very limited in how often they can call in reinforcements. It's about once every minute and a half to 2 minutes, but I will note that in the higher difficulty missions, when they call in some reinforcements, that tends to spawn things in for about a minute. You're stuck for a minute and a half dealing with it, and if you're not too quick about dealing with all of the enemies that come in, those enemies can call in reinforcements themselves, which gets you in some kind of horrible infinite loop of sorts where you're just dealing with hordes of enemies, and this can shut that down. So if you do notice that you run into that on the especially higher difficulties, this might be a great booster to have as well. I do think it's very underrated. I do think most of the people that I've played with do not use this unless it's a defensive mission, and that's even rare in itself as well. Next up, we have this expert extraction pilot. It lowers the time that it takes for the extraction shuttle to reach the extraction beacon. So one thing that I would like to note, and this is for especially new players that haven't played this game before, essentially at the end of every mission there is an SOS beacon callout where a shuttle can get called in for extraction, and typically you run to that beacon, call in the extraction, and have to hold that position for somewhere between 2 to 3 minutes, and I think this shoves 1 minute off the timer for the shuttle to come in, which means you have to defend for less time. Now, most of the time that I've noticed, that's not usually a huge issue holding for 3 minutes in a very fortified extraction spot, but it can definitely help, especially if you don't want to lose a bunch of your loot, because every time you die you drop all of the samples you picked up, etc., etc., and this can just kind of ease that burden. I do think there are better boosters than this, but it's not the worst booster, not by a long shot. Still not great, but it's probably better than the muscle enhancement. Next up, we have the motivational shocks, which allows you to recover faster from being slowed by things like acid, but it does not mitigate EMS strikes. Now, because it doesn't stop EMS strikes, I kind of count this as ultimately useless. For one thing, when you drop into a mission, you may have an idea of the enemy types that you'll face, but it's never a guarantee, and although this is very good against some enemy types, it's definitely not every enemy that's able to slow you down. Now, this is a bit more useful against the Terminids when they're spewing acid at you. You will notice that you slow down quite a bit, but it's also just an inconvenience, and you can still dive even when you're slowed. So I don't think this is the best by a long shot. This is probably on the same tier as the muscle enhancement. Now, you may find that you really like this, you hate being slowed like that. Maybe this is your cup of tea, but I do think you're going to find better boosters than this. If it did mitigate EMS strikes, however, this would be an instant A tier, I think, amongst people, because there's an EMS mortar and EMS call-in strike that you can do with stratagems, and also stun grenades that you can throw in. And if this could prevent all of that from slowing you down, you would be an absolute monster against the bugs with an EMS mortar. This would be what I use every time I go in for a melee build. So good. But alas, it specifically excludes EMS strikes. Very sad. Okay, next up is the experimental infusion. Now, I do think this is one of those top tier boosters, 100%, no questions asked. It has basically the effect of when you use a stim pack, you will get increased movement speed and also additional damage reduction. And this does stack with a vitality enhancement, which means while using stim packs, you will be very, very efficient, very fast, and hard to kill. This is a great booster for you and all your teammates, bar none, one of the best, hands down. This especially pairs really well with any of the medical kit armor passives. Give you an additional stim pack and extend the duration of your stim packs. That combo makes you almost unkillable. Very, very, very good booster. Okay. Next up, we have the Firebomb Hell Pods. Now, this is kind of a okay but annoying booster option. Essentially, everything that you call in from your own teammates, your initial landing with your Hell Pods, any support weapons, any turrets that you call in, resupplies that you call in, basically anything. Every single thing that you call in that essentially lands and deploys something gets additional a firebomb, essentially, that ignites the vicinity with fire. Now, you might think, holy crap, that's awesome. It adds extra damage to a bunch of things that normally don't damage things. You'd be right in thinking that, except the radius for this is very small, the damage is very small, and although the initial radius enemies that it lands on are going to be lit on fire, it doesn't have a large enough area to really make a huge difference, especially with turrets. You don't typically want to summon turrets on top of enemies in most games, and one of the biggest tragedies, at least this is how it used to behave, I think there may have been an update that prevents this now from damaging your teammates, but this would enable friendly fire to hurt your teammates, and this essentially became the team killing device of choice. Because not everyone would know that you had this installed, as they're focused on their own loadouts, and also in the middle of a match you may forget that this is installed and call in a resupply and stand there waiting for it to come in. That's typical behavior in the game. And then all of a sudden you'd be lit on fire and basically die. So, another thing of note about this is the damage is significant to players and insignificant to medium-sized enemies or greater. A lot of the weaker, lightly armored ones that are very easy to kill would die to this, but most other enemies would just brush it off and move on. So this is just one of those that in theory would be really good if the radius was increased and it didn't damage your teammates and it had increased damage and maybe lit the area on fire. All of those little buffs would make this worth it, but I think you're going to find there are better things than this. It's still really fun though if you're in a fire build loadout. Next up, we have the sample scanner booster. Now, this is one of those boosters that is good very early on and then drops off really bad when you no longer need samples to upgrade your ship. So in the game you have ship upgrades and it requires samples in order to do anything about them, but you will eventually finish off all of your ship upgrades and then you no longer need samples at all. Now here is the kind of monkey paw about this, is that this booster takes a while to get from a war bond, cost a lot of metals, and so you may not get this until you're already almost done with samples to begin with. And so it's awkward that you kind of get this late and then you don't need it shortly after that. However, I do have some good news for everyone watching. If you join me in the future from the Xbox, and I'll be looking out for you guys, if you drop in with me at level 1, and me and my buddy Mitch are both playing, trying to boost a bunch of you guys up, me and him will most likely pull out the sample scanner to help you guys out get double the samples at a 15% chance rate. So this is a good booster. I guess I forgot to talk about what it actually does. Gives you a 15% chance to get twice the samples every time you go to pick up samples. Yeah, but if you guys join me, I am more than willing to throw the sample scanner on, especially if you guys are asking for it or you remind me. I can throw this on and essentially everybody can pick up more samples, and I'll help you guys out even though I no longer need samples at all. Okay, next up on the boosters is the Dead Sprint. And essentially, this little booster lets you sprint even when you're out of stamina, but it begins draining your health instead. Now this can be a very good booster, but a lot of people, again, won't remember that it's active, and it can seriously begin hurting your teammates that are unaware. Now, it is very much offset by the vitality enhancement and by the experimental infusion. And if you have stamina enhancement, vitality enhancement, experimental infusion, and dead sprint, you're going to be able to traverse the map at an incredible pace. So this is one of those, it's very good, it's rarely used, but it is super good. Just keep that in mind. If you don't have vitality enhancement on, or you're wearing light armor, this could end up killing you pretty quickly. But still very good. Definitely good. Next up is maybe my personal favorite booster, even though there are other boosters that maybe will help the team more, is the armed resupply pods. Essentially, you know that starter weapon you get, the AR-23 Liberator, this straps one of those to the top of every resupply pod that you or your team's calls in, and it just shoots every enemy around you. It essentially turns resupply pods into turrets themselves. Now this isn't a heavy machine gun or anything like that, and it does only have light armor pin, but this is still amazing. It's an extra turret where you otherwise wouldn't, and I freaking love this. So, very good booster. I highly recommend it. It's usually my go-to unless I'm picking up the stamina enhancement. Okay, next up is the sample extractor, which very similar to the sample scanner, essentially allows extra samples to be picked up. Now, when you kill large enemies, there is a low chance that there will drop extra samples, and this is capped at a maximum of 10 samples per mission. Now, this is kind of following the same thing as the sample scanner, that it takes a while to get it because it's locked in a premium war bond. You have to get the money to unlock the war bond, then you have to get a bunch of medals to eventually get to it, and what you could have been doing instead of that is unlocking, for instance, these two or something like that. So it doesn't really give you a boost in the mission as well, so it's kind of a... I almost want to say it's not good, but it is good early on in the game, but by the time you get it unlocked, you're probably close to not needing it anyways. So, you know, it's good, but it's limited good. I don't know how else to describe it. But if you do see me and my friend Mitch playing, there's a decent chance that me and him will get the sample scanner and the sample extractor to help you guys out getting all of your samples. So there is that. There is hope. There is a use if you want to help other people. Usually it's not going to help you too much. And last up for the boosters that I currently have access to is the stun pods. This is very similar to the firebomb hell bombs, except whenever a hell pod is dropped, it stuns units in the vicinity. Now this is actually very good. If you call something in and you stun your enemies, you are going to be able to light them up pretty easily. You can keep a charger from pressing in on you by calling in resupply pads and whatnot. This is actually a very, very good one. Highly recommend this. It's maybe not the best, but I do think it's very good. So now that we've kind of covered all of these boosters, I'll talk about maybe the top 4 so you guys know what to keep an eye out for if you get the chance. Maybe the top couple, more than 4. So obviously I've got to go with the vitality enhancement for extra health. We got the stamina enhancement for that extra stamina capacity and recovery. The Hellpod space optimization is really good. The experimental infusion that boosts your stems to give you movement speed and damage reduction is really good. The armed resupply pads is always good. The dead sprint is additionally pretty good. And the stun pods is also fairly decent. Those are all very, very, very good boosters. These are typically the ones that you'll see in matches. Occasionally you will see the localization confusion to help mitigate against enemy encounters, and the UAV recon booster for that extra radar range. Just keep all in mind, that is my picks for the top 6, maybe 8 if you're including these two. A little versatile. Firebomb Hellpods is the fun one of the bunch. Can kill your teammates with this, maybe, unless they patch that to where it no longer damages teammates. I haven't used it in a while, so I'm not 100% sure. And there will be updates in the future, so that may change as well. Anyways. Okay, so this is covering all the boosters that I currently have. I'm now going to go ahead and cover a couple of boosters that I didn't even bother getting because of how not really useful they are. Alright guys, we are on the Helldivers Mobilize, the initial war bond that you guys will have unlocked when you first get into the game. We are on page 10, and it takes so long to finally get access to page 10. I've got a friend that is level like 70 in the game right now, somewhere around there, and he's only made it to page 6. He's hopped around to a couple other war bonds, which is part of the problem getting to page 10. But once you finally get to page 10, you get access to this booster if you purchase it for an astounding 150 medals, which could otherwise be spent on almost anything else which would serve you better, including the armor right here, the Champion of the People. This is much better than this, and I will dive into why that is right now. So as you can read from the description under increased reinforcement budget, you can see the increases the number of available reinforcements. Now that sounds good, and arbitrarily by itself, technically, yes, that is really good. You have extra lives every match, you can call in more and more, and there's a lot less pressure on you maybe. and you don't have to perform as well. The problem is comparing this to almost any other booster. Essentially, every other booster is going to benefit you in some really tangible way and help you fight off your enemies much more effectively, whereas this doesn't actually improve anything in combat. It just allows you to die a lot. So it can technically be a good thing. I mean, it will be a good thing. Having more lives is never bad, but from my experience playing this game quite a bit, it's very, very rare that we actually lose a mission because we're out of lives. Sometimes you will not extract because you completed the mission, but you didn't have enough lives to stand and hold extraction. So that is one way that this can come in handy. But you also have to think about one other factor as well. Every mission has a time limit, and once that time limit is up, you can no longer reinforce anyways. So this would be good if the missions had no time limit and just whenever you died, that was it. This would extend the mission quite a bit and help you that way, but if you're going to die already, I think it's 24 times in a match that's 40 minutes long, and you feel the need that you're going to need an extra, I think this only gives you like 4 to 8 extra lives as a squad, so maybe 1 or 2 extra drops per person. I don't think this is going to make a huge impact. There's going to be a lot of missions that you go in where you didn't use all the 24 lives to begin with. And again, compare this to other boosters, and you can see this just kind of falls in on itself as pretty bad. Now, similarly, there is another booster that is very, very, very similar and runs into the exact same issues as this booster. So let's jump over to that. Alright, so we are on the Steeled Veterans War Bond here. And again, we are on the last page of this war bond, which admittedly is much, much easier and costs a lot less medals to get to than the initial war bond, Helldivers Mobilize. And you can see this also deals with reinforcements. This is the flexible reinforcement budget. And essentially what this does is reduces the time until new reinforcements are granted once they've been depleted. Now, a lot of you guys that have not played this game before, you're going to get X amount of lives. I think a squad of 4 has access to either 20 or 24 lives. Once you run out of those lives, you will get a 2-minute cooldown, at which point an extra life is granted to your squad. So if you end up running out of lives and a couple people die and it's just 1 man left, you can hold out until you can drop more people in. Now what this does is it reduces the amount of time it takes for that extra life to come back. I think this reduces it down to just 1 minute, which admittedly sounds very, very good. But it falls short just like the other warbond that we just talked about that gives you extra reinforcements right out the gate. In fact, that warbond is probably much better than this one, because this one means you have to run out of lives and then wait for more. Now, this does have the added benefit that if you just keep running out of lives, you'll keep getting more, and you'll technically maybe get more reinforcements with this than the other one, but definitely not initially. So this just kind of does the same thing the other warbond does, but at a different rate. And it again suffers from being compared to other warbonds. Is it better to have this booster and get access to more lives when you completely run out? Or is it better to have a turret strapped to your resupply pads that will kill your enemies for you, in addition to you killing your enemies? The turret's going to win every single day. That's just kind of the same issue that we saw before. If you run out of time in your mission, this is essentially useless, and most of the time that I've played, I would say a good 90% of the missions I've played on, we have not been out of lives by the end of the mission. So, essentially, I just think this war bond is not as good as most others. I don't think this is one of the greatest. It technically does benefit your squad. It will boost you guys out. It'll give you extra lives eventually on occasion. There will be those matches where these would have been useful. That's 100% sure. But I do have to also note, in those matches where you're not doing so good and you ran out of lives, would you have more or less lives if you removed one of the other boosters that you had for that mission? Probably less. So again, this just kind of loses out on that front. It's kind of sad. I will eventually get these unlocked, but I think these are going to be one of those very, very last things to unlock for me after I get the victory poses, the player card backgrounds, the body armor, the helmets, the capes. I got a lot of things to unlock well before I get to these boosters. Alright guys, that is essentially me covering all of the boosters in the game that are there currently, and a little bit of a ranking for these. Hopefully you guys learned some information about these boosters, and when you get into the game, even though you won't have any boosters to start with, you will notice in these war bonds here, you can see a booster is looking like, I don't know, a canister, a grenade. I don't know how else to describe it. But they're all here in these war bonds. There's not always one in every single page. In fact, that's usually not the case. But they are all over this initial Helldivers Mobilize, as you can see here. They are just about everywhere. Now you do have to go a ways through this Helldiver Mobilize before you get access to the first one on page 3, which is the Space Optimization, followed by the Vitality Enhancement, followed by the UAV Recon Booster, Stamina Enhancement, etc. So they are good. You will unlock them eventually. Typically all of these other war bonds here will have at least one booster. Typically. Some of them do not, but yeah. These boosters are very good. Definitely don't forget about them when you're entering matches, and try to unlock them as quickly as you can. Every little bit helps. Alright guys, good luck out there, and hopefully I'll see you in game pretty soon. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching this episode of From ODST to Helldiver. If you found any of the information in this video useful, please go ahead and leave a like. And if you have any questions about anything, you want some clarification, or maybe you want to sync up in-game, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and maybe I can add you. We can get a couple of games together. And if you want to see a couple of more videos like this, why don't you go ahead and subscribe? That would really be appreciated. And hopefully this video gets you guys a little bit more prepared for when this inevitably drops on the Xbox. I hope everybody watching sees so many similarities between the Helldivers and the ODSTs. They're pretty much doing all of the same things. And I do find this game is, without a doubt, one of the greatest Halo games in the last 10 years. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys next time.